As most Yu-Gi-Oh players know, one of the most important parts of having a good and successful Yu-Gi-Oh deck is having a powerful, versatile engine that allows you to do a lot of different things within your deck and allows you to accomplish your main line of strategies or enables different strategies that you may otherwise have not been able to accomplish. What's going on there, my baby Dragon Squad? Today we're going to be talking about my 5 picks for the 5 current best engines in Yu-Gi-Oh that are splashable into lots of different decks. Keep in mind, this is bearing in mind the fact that Circuit Breaker is not out yet and the format will likely change, and I'll probably make a video to accommodate those changes in the near future, especially since Spirals will probably be the next best deck. So let's get into my top 5 picks. If at the end of this video you guys happen to enjoy it, make sure you guys slap a like on this video. Join the Baby Dragon Squad by subscribing and clicking that bell button. Links down below. Alright, duelists, so the first engine I want to talk about today is the Win-Witch engine. This is a very popular engine, and I think it's actually one of my least favorite engines for a couple different reasons, but it's still one of the more popular ones because of what it allows you to do. So if you're unfamiliar with the Win-Witch engine, it's typically an engine that you splash in your main deck, and you only really need 2 cards in your extra deck to make it work. You need about 6 cards in your main deck, which include 3 Ice Bell, double Glass Bell, and 1 Snow Bell. And in your extra deck, you're going to need obviously the Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, which you're going to be bringing out with your Win-Witch engine, and the Winter Bell. Ice Bell is going to allow you to special summon itself kind of like a Terra Top, which nets you your Glass Bell, which in turn nets you your Snow Bell, which as a result, you're going to be able to make Winter Bell and a Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon that is impervious to your opponent's destruction effects, which is huge because not only did we currently lose on the recent TCG Forbidden and Limited as 4 September 2017, we recently had Interrupted Kaiju Slumber go to 1, and we had Dark Hole go to 1, which means we have fewer outs in terms of board wipes, and now players are going to definitely need those Kaijus or those board wipes to out that Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon if they can't somehow already bait out its effect and then try and summon another monster or use another card's effect that can, get rid of this card without necessarily destroying it. Well, I think this engine is really good, really powerful in the sense that it allows so much board presence on the field in the form of Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and it can be a very huge pain for players to deal with. At the same time, I think it's a very fragile engine and almost glass cannon in a lot of ways, because the issue with this engine is that once it goes off, yeah, it's great, but if your opponent happens to out that Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, you're left with not only a couple cards in your deck that could potentially be dead, but at the same time, this engine has no follow-up, it has no recursion, it has no grind game. It's really just kind of a hit or miss kind of engine, and it's great in that regard. It can win you games by itself, especially early game, but after your opponent is able to deal with your Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon or whatever board you're trying to establish with your Win-Witch engine, the reality is that you're not going to be able to do too much and rely on that engine as the game progresses, which means it's not a very dynamic and versatile engine, and regardless of what deck you're playing it in. However, one of the advantages of being able to play it in certain other decks, or if you're splashing it in some Invoked engine or a Spellbook variant, maybe even a Draco variant, is that if you're using some of the Spellbook cards in this deck, keep in mind that these are also spellcasters, so there are some cool plays you could do with this, bearing in mind that Spellbook of Knowledge can potentially net you some free draw power off of these if they happen to be on the field, but that's very rare. It's probably not going to come up very often. It's just another potential option for this engine. The next engine I want to be talking about today is the Brilliant Fusion engine. I think this is still one of my favorite engines on this entire list that I'll be giving you guys just because of how splashable it is and how many different decks can use it, and really what it allows you to do even as the game progresses, especially if you're splashing this engine into an ABC deck or an ABC Draco deck or really any other deck, even LS or some kind of zombie variant. I think it's such a cool and dynamic engine. If you don't know what it does, Brilliant Fusion allows you to dump something like a Gem Knight Garnet or any other Gem Knight monster in addition to one other monster based on the monster you're trying to bring out, and typically you're going to be bringing out Gem Knight, Seraph Knight, which allows you to gain an additional normal summon once per turn, and as a result, dumping something like a Trick Clown to the grave will allow you to summon it back once it's dumped via Brilliant Fusion to have another monster on your field. So for the price of 1 Brilliant Fusion activation, especially early game, you're able to send a Gem Knight Garnet and perform a Trick Clown to the grave, get your Trick Clown back, and summon a Gem Knight Garnet, which will allow you a second normal summon once per turn. And that's cool because this is still Earth. You can still potentially bring out Mysis Radiant or link with any of these monsters. So this is effectively a 1-card link, especially when we get more link monsters. This is going to be fantastic. And I think in a deck like Draco's or any kind of Draco or ABC Draco variant, this is fantastic because you always are going to have extra normal summon cards in your hand. You're going to either have ABC pieces, you might have Draco cards in your hand, and that's fantastic because you're able to get them out onto the field very quickly, and as a result, you're able to either pop these cards potentially with Diagram, you're able to use Brilliant Fusion as a regular continuous spell on the field to tribute it, for Masterpiece, an Ignis, potentially a Maiden, and so on and so forth. And then once it's in your graveyard, you're able to banish it for Masterpiece's effect to pop a card. And then you could potentially make use of these guys either in the form of XYZs, you're able to use Trick Clown in the form of maybe for a Synchro Summon, or a lot of other cool plays. So I think the Brilliant Fusion is very, very good. I think a lot of people are surprised that it wasn't hit in some shape or form on this list, but I think I'm glad it's here. I think it's cool that we have another potential enabler, and it's just a very small, compact engine. It's only really requiring 5 cards in the main deck along with 1 Seraphonite in your extra deck at the bare minimum to make the engine work, at least to the most successful degree in my personal opinion. And I think at the end of the day, it's still going to be a fan favorite engine. I know for sure myself, I'm going to be trying to play this in whatever deck I play, just because I think it's such a cool, unique engine that allows you not only get board presence out on the field, but it also allows you to have an immediate play as soon as the game starts. Now, the issue with an engine like this is if you run very few targets for Brilliant Fusion, such as only running 1 Gem Knight Garnet, you could potentially draw the Gem Knight Garnet early on in the game. And if you're not running the Invoked engine and you don't have Invocation, you're not going to be able to summon that Gem Knight Seraphonite most likely throughout the rest of the game, unless you can somehow get that Garnet back into your deck. And the reality is anytime you're drawing multiple Brilliant Fusions, it's not really that great unless you're running the Draco engine, because you're not going to be able to pop it with Diagram, you're not going to be able to tribute it for any of your Draco monsters, use it for Masterpiece, etc, etc, etc. But it's still one of my favorite engines overall on this entire list. The third engine I'm going to be showing off today is actually the Spellbook engine, and it's arguably one of the most popular engines in the OCG, or was the most popular engine in the OCG the last format and a half, and is now kind of something that we have to rely on here in the TCG. It includes Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, Spellbook of Secrets, and Spellbook of Knowledge. This 3-card engine is very powerful, very popular, and you can run it in a versatile amount of ratios, but I think a 2-2-2 is pretty standard. We've also seen a 1-2-2 engine. You're able to use this on quite a few different cards. I know I myself have used this in everything from Dracos to Invoke to just a lot of different variants out there, and I think it's great because really just drawing any one of these 4 cards right here, your 2 Secrets or 2 Spellbook Magician, nets you out of all of this potentially a Destiny draw, which is a 2 for 2, but it still allows your deck to have a compact engine and only 6-card engine or 5-card engine, to where you can draw some free cards and potentially use it with other cards that may already be existing in your deck. And what it allows you to do is, if you have Secrets or Blue Boy, you can activate either Secrets or summon Blue Boy, net your Secrets, or activate Secrets, search your Blue Boy, summon the Blue Boy, use this to search your Spellbook of Knowledge, and either one of these 2 cards will get each other, and then as a result of that, they'll get your Knowledge. Now, your Knowledge will allow you to send your Blue Boy from your field to the graveyard to basically draw 2 cards, or if you happen to have either one of these other 2 Spellbook cards in your hand mid to late game after you've used the rest of the engine, you're able to basically draw 2 free cards. And in addition to that, if you happen to have other spellcasters in your deck, such as Wind Witches that are already out on the field, or you happen to have something like a Trick Clown on your field, which is what I've been doing with the Brilliant Fusion engine and the Spellbook engine, you're able to send that Trick Clown to the grave to gain 2 free cards if you have Knowledge. So this engine's really cool. It's a very short and sweet engine. It doesn't require you to have any extra deck components to it, which is great, and you're able to change up the ratios in a way that a lot of the other engines aren't able to do to optimize it, and it could potentially play into the other engines that you already have into your deck. And it's definitely one of the best engines, I think, right now for speed and consistency in any top deck. The next engine I want to highlight, and is my 4th top pick for this format, is the Draco engine. Keep in mind that this engine wasn't really hit all that much, other than having Dynamite banned and Ignis limited to 1, which makes a big problem for the pure variant of this deck, or obviously the Draco Zoo variant, which Zoo has been predominantly removed from competitive play. But it means that this engine now becomes more of a splashable engine. Masterpiece is still at 3, Diagram is still at 3, which means this is still a viable search and win condition that you could play in almost any deck out there. It allows you to have some potential extra draw power, some free spell and trap removal, some potential monster removal, and a tiny bit of recursion. And it allows you to get one of the best win conditions we've had in a long time in the form of Masterpiece in almost any deck. You can play this in a Wind Witch Spellbook or a Draco deck. You can play this with Draco Spellbooks. You can play Draco ABCs. You can play the brilliant Draco ABC version that I've showed off. You can play Dracos in almost any top deck right now, and it'll easily bump up your deck in the form of competition, because it'll give you something that a lot of other decks may otherwise not be playing, and that's having a card that allows you to potentially interact with your other cards by popping your own cards, maybe get some additional advantage, recursion, draw power, free popping and attack manipulation, and you're able to get the most powerful win condition and masterpiece that allows you to interact with your opponent by basically popping their cards, but at the same time it's impervious to whatever effects you tribute for. If you tribute a spell and trap, you're going to be impervious to spells and traps. If you tribute a trap and monster, it's going to be trap monster. If you tribute a monster and a spell, it's going to be monster and spell. Or if you just tribute one of these, it's just going to be impervious to one of them. So if you, let's say, obviously tribute 2 traps, it's only going to be impervious to traps or two spells or 2 monsters. So Masterpiece is a versatile card. However, it's still being at 3. Most decks are only really going to opt to play 2 of it that do play this engine, unless you're really going for a much more pure variant of the deck, or something like a Spellbook Draco variant while you exclude the Invoked engine, simply because you're going to need to play 3 Masterpiece, because really you're not going to be playing Metaltron. At the same time, you still have your 3 Terraformings to complement the engine very well. We all expected this card to get hit. And then in addition to that, a lot of players are probably going to be trying to play this card, which is Maiden. She is a searcher. You're able to search your Masterpiece, your Ignis, or really, that's basically the only monsters you can search consistently other than Metaltron from your deck, or herself. She's great. She's definitely not an Ignis or a Dynamite. Dynamite allows you to grind a lot better because you're able to get your Return or your Apocalypse. And unfortunately, this engine has been handicapped in that regard. And I think this engine has actually been hurt a lot more than people expected to have been hit. But at the same time, it's still a very, very powerful engine. You just can't really make do with it on its own. You definitely have to be using this engine in something. And I feel with Diagram, as long as a powerful field spell like this exists into the game and that allows you to search an alternate win condition, means that any deck that can fully take advantage of Diagram is definitely going to be in the contention for being a top deck, even once Spirals come out, in my personal opinion. The final engine I want to be talking about today is the Invoked engine. I think this is clearly the most popular engine right now, at least in my personal opinion, just because of how much things it can do across the board. You can splash this pretty much in a couple different decks, or you can play a more pure Invoked version or a Windwitch Invoked, which is one of the better variants. You can also play Spellbooks with Invoked, with Dracos. I highlighted on that earlier. But what you can do with this is Alistair allows you to effectively search yourself an Invocation Fusion card, and this allows you to either use your own cards or potentially some of your opponent's cards to get some really, really powerful fusions out onto the field, which is actually a downside, but I'll get into that briefly in a second. And then the final card is Magical Meltdown, which if you're playing this in a deck, this allows you to net yourself these cards right here, and as a result, it's kind of a cyclical engine. Your Alistair can get you your Invocation after you use Meltdown, and then this protects you with whatever Invocation you're using or any of the fusion monsters that come out. And then lastly, in addition to that, your Invocation can net you back your Alistair and put itself back into the deck, very much like how Metal Foes used Metal Foes Fusion. The issue with this engine, in my opinion, is the fact that you tend to have a lot of extra deck space, or you need to have a lot of extra deck space to make this engine very good, because you're going to be bringing out sometimes multiple Makabas. You're sometimes going to be bringing out, other ones that you're not always having to bring out consistently games, but they need to be there on the off chance you play against something like Paleos, in which case you might always want to bring out the Water Invoked Fusion monster, which can be a complete blowout against them. But as a result, the deck and the engine as a whole in the extra deck for Invoked can take up anywhere from 8 to 10 cards sometimes, and that's kind of problematic because it can dilute some of your other strategies if they rely on the extra deck mechanic, or fusing, or link summoning, or XYZ summoning, or even other fusion monsters that you're otherwise playing in your deck. But the biggest advantage of an engine like this, in my personal opinion, is number one, that allows you to get those powerful monsters on the board, unlike something like the Spellbook engine or the Windwitch engine or a lot of these other engines. This engine can be great over the course of a duel, not just early on. It's a little bit weaker than the Invoked engine, or excuse me, the Windwitch engine early on in a duel, because you're not always guaranteed to get that initial summon, that turn one, especially if you want to use your opponent's resources with Invocation, which means this card is going to be much, much better as the game progresses, and as a result, you're going to be able to use your Alistair and your Invocation cyclically by putting them back in your deck, using them over and over and over. So this is a fantastic engine as the game goes on. I'm personally much more partial to an engine like this because I feel you don't want to have a glass cannon like engine. I feel this is certainly not a glass cannon engine. And then in addition to that, you're also able to use this engine because Alistair is a spellcaster monster. You're able to use this with the Spellbook engine. You can use Spellbook of Knowledge on him to draw 2 cards, which is great. You can send him to the graveyard after he uses effect if you're not doing anything turn 1. And if you have a Knowledge, you can get those free pluses and have him still be in the graveyard for your next invocation play the turn after that. So I think this is definitely my top pick for the best engine, and I think it's significantly better than a lot of the other engines out there. But a lot of these engines tend to interact with one another, so it's certainly not necessarily set in stone. I think this engine will still continue to be played as the format progresses. We'll see how Spirals displace this or any of the other decks or potentially any of the other engines out there and how they make do with them. Guys, that concludes my top 5 engines I think of this current format pre-circuit break. There is one other engine I wanted to mention, but I will probably be making an independent video on that because I think this engine will actually get better as Circuit Break comes out, and I think it's going to be one of the most important engines in Yu-Gi-Oh! And potentially could be an engine that actually gets either banned or limited in some shape or form as the next list probably approaches, either in September, or now that we have one in September, we're probably not going to get another one maybe until November, December, or maybe even next year, so we'll have to see how Konami does that. But I think in summary, these engines are all equally good in the sense that you can use them in a lot of different decks, but I think the best engine currently right now for what it is over the course of a game are probably tied between the Invoked engine and the Draco engine, closely followed by the Spellbook engine and the Brilliant Fusion engine and Wind Witch engine. I would say are about equal. I think the Wind Witch engine is a little bit more popular just because people like bringing out their Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon and making sure that it's impervious to everything, which means you have a built-in win condition, but I think it's the most glass cannon of all these engines. I think the Brilliant Fusion engine is a little bit more splashable and versatile in that regard, which is why I ranked it higher. And then the Spellbook engine, you're able to use it with almost all these engines here, which means it's so cool. This is probably the most versatile engine other than the Draco engine, which nets you a win condition and can interact with its own deck, its own cards, other cards, whether it be Spellbooks. If you're using them to have draw power, you can use it with the Invoked engine. You can use this with ABCs. You can use this with a lot of different combo pieces in a lot of different decks. And then finally the Invoked engine, which will allow you over the course of a game to constantly have fusion monsters, some powerful fusion monsters, interacting with the Spellbook cards such as Spellbook of Knowledge, and it allows you to have some very good resilience against a lot of the top decks. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to slap a like on it, become a patron on my Patreon if you guys want to help the channel grow. You guys can also gain some cool rewards, links down below in the description, and make sure you guys are part of the hashtag Baby Dragon Squad. It helps the channel grow. If you guys are enjoying these videos, make sure you guys check out my live streams and click that bell button. I'll see you guys next time with another video, hopefully tomorrow, and I will be making another video either tomorrow or in the next couple days time, but talking about the engine that I think is extremely important moving forward, and that engine is something that I think you guys all need to have on your radar if you haven't had it on your radar already. Take it easy, my Baby Dragon Squad. I'll see you guys tomorrow with another awesome video. Have a blast, and always remember, duelists, to believe in the heart of the cards. I'll see you guys next time.